Welcome back, everyone. This is the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage, and you are looking at the ice cream cone shaped motor from the Singer 301 Slant-O-Matic. So I wanted to show you all that in this video I want to talk about the bearings. And the purpose of this video is for those of you who want to potentially service your motor without pulling it apart, without taking the whole thing apart and having to put it back together. That is another series of videos I will do, and that's more of a complete disassembly. For today, though, some of you may not want to do that, or you may not find someone who's willing to do it. How can you rejuvenate the grease in bearings when it's old and it's not as easy to get to without totally disassembling this motor? And I'll show you that. Now, I'm going to zoom in here, and notice I'm holding the motor with it sitting on its Bakelite end. It's on a towel. It's nice and cushioned, so it shouldn't harm or stress the motor out any. Now let's zoom in here, and I'm going to have to get some light on this. It's not easy to see. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it'll be a little bit easier. Now, take my shop light here. Let's see if you guys can see this, where I'm pointing. I can get everything together here. Light, camera, action. Let's see. Trying to see what it is I'm showing you all. I think I want to get in a little bit closer. Now what you're looking at is basically, you're seeing the commutator, and then below the commutator, see here, if you look closely, you're going to see the commutator. Actually, let me prop this so I can actually give you a better view of what we've got going on. Let's see. I'm a camera crew of one here, guys, so bear with me. I want to prop this up in a way that I can point to it. I'm going to move everything around here just a second. There we go. This is a little bit better, folks, because I've got two hands here and I really want to show you what I'm doing. Now, notice here's your brush holder. Here's your commutator. We've cleaned it. Now, inside of here is grease, and this is either a bearing or a bushing, and it could be one of either. They made running changes. Now, just below the commutator, if you kind of take, you can take something and point. I'll take this little tool here I've got. Notice I'm going to take this right under the commutator. If you look really closely, you will see the drive shaft. When I turn this, you see the commutator turning. It's attached to a drive shaft that is going into the bearing housing or the grease housing right there. Okay, now Singer did away with the port, the grease port that used to stick up out of here, where you could apply grease to the wick and it would feed new grease to the bearing. So yes, you can disassemble the entire motor, but some of you may not want to do that at this point. And I'm going to get real close with the light here and show you just at the base of your commutator. So here's the commutator. You come underneath it, and there's a black part of this overall housing, but notice that it's sort of shaped like a bell, and it recedes inward, and just at the top of it there's about a 1/16 of an inch, and that is the drive shaft that the whole motor spins on. And it's a little tough to see, but it's right there. If you see the commutator moving, look beneath it, you'll see the black housing, and there is a little spot here where the drive shaft goes down into where the grease would be. Now, this is a restores technique. This is not part of normal lubrication for the owner. When you're sewing, let's say this is your machine and you're trying to take care of it. You clean your lint, you oil your machine based on the manual. This is not what you would normally do to service your machine. This is a restoration technique. Now, I'm going to take, this is of course the 30 weight oil that you saw in it's kind of a large close-up here, but this is the 30 weight oil that you saw in the quart. I have it in a separate oiler. I'm going to take my oiler and I'm going to take the tip and I'm going to put it right under the commutator. And then I'm going to put 1 drop. Notice I said 1, not 3, not 2, 1. Now I'm going to take the motor and I'm going to sit it upright like this. It would help if I turn the camera so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. So notice that the oil is now on the drive shaft, just that drop, and gravity should, and you can take the worm gear here and you can turn it, and gravity and turning this will allow that oil to work its way down into the bearing. Now, these bearings, or in this case a bushing, uses grease, but that grease is old, and grease gets kind of thick and mud-like when it gets old. And in that situation, that's where you really want to, that 1 drop of that 30 weight oil, not sewing machine oil, will be useful because it's going to allow, we're going to try to re-liquefy that grease. This is why 1 drop and 1 drop only is important. If you put too much in there, you're going to create a mess and you could damage the motor. So again, I cannot overemphasize 1 drop, because as the motor gets warm, that oil will work its way down into the old grease and it will re-liquefy it, and that will help extend the life of the grease that's in there and allow it to do its job in keeping the motor lubricated. Now, this is the other end of the motor, and just like that one, without removing the bearing completely, you know, how are we going to get grease to it? How are we going to get lubrication to it? Remember, this could be the original, I'm sure it's the original bearing, and likely the original grease. Now, I will show you what this bearing actually looks like when it's out of the motor. Okay, guys, I always keep at least 1 spare with me of these. This is the bearing for this motor. And I keep a spare with me. It looks like a little donut, like a little lifesaver. And of course, this is what this is the bushing, I suppose you would say. And then inside are the little bearing. And again, I rarely have to replace them. That's how well these motors were made. But you definitely want to keep them lubricated. So again, if we needed to, we can further disassemble this motor and replace the bearing. Most of you will not need to do that, so we're not doing that today, but I wanted to kind of show you what that bearing looks like when it's out of the motor. Here you can see the top of it, right? Now, what you are looking at is the top of the worm gear looks like that, right? Now, what I'm going to do is I want to get some of this. There's some old grease here, but that's not really hurting anything. But I'm going to get the old grease off so I can see what's up, see what's going on. You know, sometimes you might want to question, you know, why take all this time? I mean, it's an old machine. Some people would say, oh, just use it until it quits, and you know, use it until it quits. Well, how long it goes before it quits and gives up can be literally generations. When I call real vintage machines heirloom quality, I mean it literally. They are literally handed down generation to generation. They require maintenance, but not, when you think about it, not that much. It's rather surprising how little maintenance they require. So just like I say, I'm just inspecting things here, looking. Now, what do I want to do here? I am going to take, again, this is my 30 weight oil. This is what you saw in the, it doesn't have to be this brand. That's the brand that I used right there. And believe me, you will use this so seldom as a sewing machine restorer. I think 1 quart is pretty much your lifetime supply. I don't think, may you live many years, but I don't think you're ever going to need that much of it because you use it sparingly, and I cannot overemphasize that enough. So, what are we doing? Notice here's where the bearing lies, and I'm going to put 1 drop here and then 1 on the other side, right? And I'm just going to let that oil it's going to work its way around. And again, it's not as thin as sewing machine oil, and we don't want it to be, because when the motor gets warm, sewing machine oil will be too thin and it can run in places we don't want it to. So again, we've got the oil here where we needed it, right at the top of the bearing. Now right up here where there's this bolt where the gear is, you can also put a drop there. Some restores have done this, but that's it. I mean, literally, you know, just a few drops, guys. And remember, a little goes a long way. Less is more, not more is more. Okay, and that's true. Imagine if you had a watch, a true, like a Swiss-made gear-driven watch. You took it to the jeweler. If they put, you know, 10 ounces of oil in there, you'd have a mess. You need just enough to do what you need to do and no more. So now, what are we doing? We're doing something. Notice that when this gear spins, there is grease. There's old grease in that bearing. And this 30 weight oil, and this is the only place I use this, folks, never put that 30 weight oil in the rest of your sewing machine. Sewing machine oil is all you use. This is a restorer's oil, and it is only used for basically jump starting old grease when you cannot easily get access to the bearings, or maybe you don't want to, or you don't want to pay someone for a full disassemble of the motor, although the motor is designed to come apart. One last thing, you remember this old oil that looks kind of like a varnished glue? Let's get rid of that. It would be very nice to just not have to worry about that again when we put the machine back. If there's a bunch of it in that tunnel in the machine, you can always take that off. And notice it comes right off. You know, this rubbing alcohol is a very good solvent. Just remember that the power of this rubbing alcohol to remove this old mucky oil, it is also powerful in the sense that it can ruin your lacquer finish. So don't get it anywhere near the paint of your sewing machine. Do not. It will instantaneously, upon contact, ruin your lacquer. And it can really ruin your day if that happens. So there's a way to fix it, but you know, you don't want to create issues and problems for yourself. Okay, so next video, I am going to reinstall the motor and we'll put it back in. One of the last things to mention here, guys, is, and I need to put these back, of course. I'll be putting these back in. And again, these little bolts go into these holes here. What I would do here is, I'm not really so much worried. These were not especially tight. You can put one drop, and I do mean one only, on the very tip of the bolt, which I just did, okay? And now, when I put this back, that will, if I have to take it out again, it'll come right out, right? Because this bolt, or screw, I call it a bolt, it may have been in there since 1951. You know, it's been sitting there a long time. It's a miracle that the things do come out. And notice as soon as it snugs up, I stop. Right? I was just turning it. You'll see me do the other one as well. You turn it gently, and when you'll feel it start to get snug. And I need to turn my camera here so you guys can see a little bit better about what I'm up to. And again, one drop of my 30 weight right on the tip. That's it. Right? You can even wipe some of that off. You don't need much. Okay? You just want enough to lubricate the screw for the future. Now I'm going to put this in. I know this sounds silly, but believe me, you do not want to break this. So notice I'm turning. It's very easy. It turns very easily. And just going at a nice little pace here. And all of a sudden, I will feel it. Is my screwdriver in place? There we go. I'm turning. And then all of a sudden, it snugs up. As soon as it snugs, I stop. Okay? It shouldn't go anywhere. Once you snug it down, it's good. Don't torque wrench it like you were putting a tire on a car. That's just not something you want to do. And there it is. It is ready for reinstallation. So the next video, we will put this motor back in. One last thing to mention about this. Very often, particularly with the bearing up above, sometimes these motors, as they age, when the old grease hardens, they can start to make a noise. And that's the machine talking to you, telling you that the bearing is not getting the lubrication it needs. It doesn't mean the bearing's bad, but it means it could go bad. For some of you, that 1 or 2 drops, and that's it, of oil here, like I showed earlier, sometimes that will quiet it down, because again, it will get warm and it will mix with the old grease and it will liquefy the grease and help restore that lubrication to the bearings. And that should help with the noise. If it doesn't, then it may mean that you need to disassemble the whole piece, clean it out, put in new grease, or you may just need to replace the bearing. But here's the good news. This is a Singer. Getting parts for Singers are, I'd say they're the easiest brand on the planet to get parts for. And I bought this bearing, and I don't remember what it cost me, $5 or something. It's not a lot. So that's the good news. And I'm never worried about not being able to get a part for one of these motors, or to get a replacement motor if I needed one. I've never had to replace one of these, but you never know, you might. So there you go. So I notice I'm holding it upright, and I'm spinning the drive shaft here, and it's again, I think this is basically a way to restore lubrication without disassembly. If I get a motor where the bearings are shot, we'll take the whole thing apart. That is a long series of videos, and it is a process that you might enjoy doing, but it involves a lot more steps. Again, it can be done. It was designed to be done. And when you hold one of these motors in your hand, you realize the quality is just incredible, right? It's a 70-year-old motor. The wiring in it is fine. I have checked it, and it should be ready for more lifetime. It just needed some servicing. Again, if you ever have a motor of any kind, this one or otherwise, if you have any suspicion that any doubt of the soundness of the motor and the wiring, you definitely want to have it checked. Always do that. Always be overly cautious when dealing with such things. But again, once you know your wiring is sound, as you can see what I've done in this series of videos, servicing this motor is really just, the access to it is just so much simpler than a potted motor. And I love potted motors. They're incredibly high quality. But again, this was Singer's next generation of direct gear drive motors, and they've really made it easier to service, and the quality, I think, is just as good as the potted motors. Some of you may agree or not, but anyway, if you have experience with any of the Singer Slantomatics, if you've had motor issues, if you've had motor successes, please let me know there in the comments. And next video, we will get this motor back into the machine where it belongs. Take care.